This is the Paranormal Search radio show and podcast. Discussing unexplainable events that shape our extraordinary world.
Three, two, one, fire!
Hey everyone, welcome to the Paranormal Search radio show and podcast. My name is Jeremy, and tonight we have special guest Rob Potter. Rob is being interviewed by the president of the Paranormal Search of Pennsylvania, Ross Weidler, and the vice president, Anthony V. Pugliese. Due to some technical issues on my part, we were supposed to have the episode with an interview with Raymond Keller. That's being pushed back a couple of weeks. But Rob does a fine job of describing some of the things that him and Ray both research. So throughout the conversation of this interview, when you happen to hear Ray often being mentioned, it's Ray Keller. He is the author of the Venus Rising series. So let's listen to Rob Potter discuss Pleiadian spacecraft designs, creating artificial time warp zones, and how to get the most out of this crazy world.
All right, Robert Potter. He's been researching healing and consciousness for over 40 years. He's given seminars all over the world. He's experiencing UFO contact since 1975. At the age of 18, he's traveled extensively in his search for truth, has spent time with an Indian spiritual master named Sal Baba in India. He's considered an expert in pyramidology and the use of crystals. He is a master healer in the art of laying on hands in almost every modality of massage. Now, he's also a friend of Raymond Keller, we had on the show last month. He's world-renowned, a real physical contactee of the Venusians and the Pleiadians. He likes to share his knowledge freely about the travelers from Venus. His friend and fellow contactee, Raymond Keller, helped arrange this very real meeting that we're having today in this encounter. In the message we will receive directly from Rob, we'll give the Venusian hierarchy of light a message of love and hope for the people of Earth. Rob, you've been seen all over the world. Is that correct? Canada, Australia, Egypt, Europe?
Yeah, I've been in Japan, China. I took Raymond to China. I speak in Bolivia, Peru, Canada, United States, Australia.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, I worked with a very famous scientist who was a contactee. His name was Fred Bell. His great uncle invented the telephone. His father invented the automatic transmission for Henry Ford. He grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and was running through the hemp fields of Henry Ford. He was trying to make hemp oil the fuel oil of choice, but the Rockefellers and the oil cartels wouldn't have it. So they outlawed hemp before World War I, and then they had to make it legal again for the war effort. But it's basically, that was a control matrix, a lie, a deception, and remains so to this day. So he studied the shockwave of the atomic bomb at 15 because he was a genius, actually. He was fixing those giant television sets when he was 8. So he was drafted in the Air Force, which was illegal, 2 weeks before his 16th birthday. At 17, he was moved out to UC Santa Barbara, where he was to get a PhD in physics at the age of 17. So basically, in about 8 months, he got a PhD in physics. Then he went into service at the Air Force. At 18, he was already being in training for what at that point in time was the world's most advanced radar set. I think he said it was a PNFS 38 radar set. They could fry an egg at 10 miles at 50,000 feet. So this is in 1963. 2 years they came out, and he's stationed at Point Reyes, California, which is the farthest westernmost point on the United States, and early warning radar. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, UFOs were coming down, vectoring off of certain natural magnetic highway pathways that they use, going down to Cuba. So he was watching this happening. Everyone's watching it, and he was kind of new to the scene, and they were burning the reports. So he got upset and said, "Look, you can't do that." They said, "Son, we've been doing it for years, and who are you?" And so he would kind of complain at the end of every day. And then finally, after 2 weeks of this, they'd had enough, and so they kind of set him up and said, "Hey, Bell, did you see a UFO today?" He goes, "Sir, we all have, and why aren't you doing this?" And so he was doing things like, I think what he told me, what got them really pissed off, he had a motorcycle. So you weren't supposed to ride the motorcycle in a certain area of base. He would go in to right into the commandant or whoever it is of the entire base and rev up his motorcycle really loud, a little bit of Brando there or whatever. And so they set him up, and he said yes, and 2 MPs came in with a straitjacket already prepared, and they took him to the psychiatric ward. So he basically they gave him a honorable discharge. Then he went to work for NASA, and he was working under Werner von Braun on the Saturn, Gemini, and Apollo missions. He was an aerospace checkout engineer. He only worked for NASA for a while, I think, but what happened at NASA was the same kind of story. He, very sharp, electrical guy, and he was noticing that they were doing shoddy work in the capsule. He was working in the actual modules where the astronauts were, and he complained at the highest level, kept going up the ladder, and they go, "Who's this upstart, smart aleck little kid?" And so finally, they fire him. They take it all the way up. He keeps climbing up the ladder and bothering the guys above the people that are telling him, "Shut up, mind your own business, who are you, blah, blah, blah." And then he filed suit with the ALCU. He got a hefty check in the end, and they begged him to come back. And the reason why is 3 men died on the Cape in the area where he was talking about with the shoddy wiring. It was a test. They didn't even take off.
You're talking about Grissom and them, right?
Yeah, 3 of them died at the Cape.
Yeah,
in a
Chaffee,
fire.
Grissom, and
anyway,
White, Ed White.
So he said, "Oh, Fred, come back. Please be the head of our quality control. We have a lot to learn," and blah, blah, blah. He said no. He took his paycheck, and he was working at, I think at that point he was already working at JPL, and then he went to work for Rockwell. He told me back in the day when I met him when I was like 16 or 17. So he was doing pyramids. I was in spiritual development with pyramids and understanding metaphysical concepts. And it was shortly after that he was having experiences with the Pleiadians. A lot of this information actually goes back to the Venusians. The Venusians were in contact. Their first contact was a guy named George Adamski. And so Fred lived in his house. So I went up the hill. I met Fred. And I was a massage therapist most of my life. We went to UC Santa Barbara as a lifeguard, played water polo, a swimmer, and pretty much a beach boy. Did my healing work, and I started having these experiences with Fred with the Pleiadians. And a lot of my early days, they were out-of-body experiences, but they were accompanied by physical sightings and things like that. So it was pretty difficult to kind of, get a grasp on it. Fred didn't really explain a lot to me. He let me have my own experiences, which I kind of respect. Would have been nice to have a little more understanding, but he'd call me late at night, usually like 11 or 12. He goes, he called his house the temple. He said, "The temple's humming tonight. You better get up here." And I was trained in certain Tibetan breathing exercises, and I was able to, after coming into the house, I would always light the incense, and I would do these breathing exercises, and I'd go into a meditative state, and the next thing I knew, I was out of my body. And a couple times I actually remember watching the earth disappear beneath me, and the light on one side of the earth And I said, why are we always doing it at night? And he said, because the astral plane is asleep. It's easier for you to get out, And so they would take me up, and I would just be getting training. I'd get all this information, downloads. I didn't understand it really, but I was shown certain things. I was actually taken to other systems, extremely beautiful spiritual experiences. And then, I'll let you ask some questions because I can go on the story forever. But so that's what started me off. And there was a guy named Billy Meyer in Switzerland. And at the age of 17, Colonel Wendell Stevens, who has now passed away, was sending to us the actual notes of Billy Meyer. So every contact that Billy Meyer had, I was reading his personal contact notes at the age of 17 and devouring it. And then eventually I met the Pleiadian cosmonaut Sannyasi. It wasn't revealed to me at that time who she was, but later I figured out that who she was. They don't always, reveal themselves, one, for your security, and two, for others. So Fred was going behind the hill in the house. He was being taken up, and eventually he didn't like coming back down because it was such to go up into this, free from negativity type of space, because we have a lot of stuff going on here that we're not really aware of. It was difficult for him to get out of the craft, Another contactee I know named Alex Collier said the same thing, he was crying, he didn't want to leave, and they had to almost kick him. They started walking him towards the door. He goes, I don't want to go. And they go, and they said the pain you carry is the love you withhold. So you got to go. That's the mission. You agreed to this. You signed up for it. And don't worry about your little physical body. It's, you're one of us. You're coming back, and it's all good. So Fred was having experiences on the ground. They gave you technology in regards to pyramids, crystals, lasers, sound, light, and color, and some jewelry devices that are on my website. It's Promise Revealed, The Promise Revealed, UAT.com. You can generally find it if you Google my name, but you have to add the UAT.com. And so I work with him extensively, traveling the country, selling pyramids and building these advanced pyramid systems and stuff that you can see on my website. And I've worked very closely with several other world-famous contactees. One was Dr. Frank Stranges, who met the Venusian commander, Valiant Thor, at the Pentagon. Valiant Thor was a Venusian. See, the Venusians have been trying to work with the government for a long time. They started outfitting the solar system about 2,000 years ago in anticipation for what's taking place now. So they put up radio, they hollowed out a bunch of asteroids, moved them around, and put them up around the Earth in a defensive postures, as Raymond has probably told you. That's all my history.
So
there.
This is the man that you I guess affectionately they call him the Pyramid Man?
Yeah, that's Fred Bell.
Yeah.
This girl in high school told me, hey, do you want to, I said, I'm interested in pyramids. She goes, I know the Pyramid Man. I said, the Pyramid Man? Really? Okay, I got to meet this guy. So,
tell us about his X1 healing machine. And he also says here he designed a time machine spaceship. It utilizes the interstellar conversion process. Do you know how that works at all, or is that something he has to explain?
So what happened was he was going on Jesse Ventura, and he was going to be talking about some stuff, and he had a heart attack. Some people believe it was a government heart attack weapon. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Oh.
But he did die unexpectedly. Now the X1 healing machine is technology given by the Venusians to two gentlemen back in the 50s, Thomas Hart and Fred Hart and Thomas Colson. And they were using a single cathode ray tube. I believe it was filled with argon. It was basically emitting a certain type of light frequency using noble gases in the tubes. And the concept was, this is a technology that was used in the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid was an initiation chamber back in the days when mankind was open and aware of and other extraterrestrial groups and working with them. So, to a certain extent, they were called the sky gods, and there was a little bit of, I don't know, call it mysticism or whatever from the extraterrestrials. They kind of play the wizard behind the curtain for certain reasons there, and that goes into a whole
what's the
another can of
what's the difference between Dr. Raymond Andrew Keller, who was the last guest on our show, who wrote books about Venus? He mentioned in there some kind of machine. It's now a day spa, from what I understand, but it's in California, I think. It's called the Rejuvenator, or something like that.
I'm not sure. There's all kinds of new electronic frequency technologies, because when you look at the body and you understand, physics, everything is actually related to consciousness. Everything is consciousness.
Yeah.
Everything just is. And we put labels on it, and we dissect things with our mind, with our emotions, with our feelings, with our perceptions. But there's a electrical level, and then to go into quantum mechanics. Fred was a physicist, and so I pretty much understand a fair amount about physics from an armchair. I don't know the math, but I pretty much understand the concepts because I was explained them my whole life. So, I met him at 17. He died when he was, I met him at 33, and he was 64 when he died. So I knew him for 31 years pretty intimately. I knew him better than his daughters did, and I knew his overall story better than all four of his wives, although one of his wives with him for 10 years, Mirwala. So I know the whole history. We had many experiences. It'd be pretty amazing. We'd be up there, his wives and his daughters would be asleep, and we'd have these amazing experiences in his living room with crystals and lasers, which are kind of understood as healing. But it was kind of fun back then, for sure. So the interstellar conversion process is kind of how time travel takes place. And what happens is they accelerate the mass of the ship, so it begins to phase out from the physical plane. It goes on to what's called the astral plane. And the astral plane, it starts to get bigger. As it gets smaller here, it gets bigger there. So they travel at many multiples of the speed of light. We don't understand that. And then on top of that, they travel multiples of speed of light through various wormholes. So this is some of the advanced technology that mankind can look forward to. At this point in time, we have a very immature, emotional, and mental aspect here on the physical plane. Mm-hmm. And there's actually some good guys and bad guys when it comes to extraterrestrials. And there's also groups that live inside the Earth, what they call Agartha. It's like the old myths and everything have roots in truth. Asgard is inside the Earth, or Agartha, and then you've got Middle Earth and the Lord of the Rings. That's the surface, and then you have Ragnarok. That would be the heavenlies, or the higher worlds. And on these higher worlds, there's dimensional changes. So, you have beings from the higher dimensions. You go to that planet, you don't see anything, but they live in a higher dimension. You wouldn't even see them. Can you imagine? And Raymond told me this. There's 60 planets in our solar system.
So what? I've heard, that we have a lot more than just 8 or 9.
We don't even see them.
Yeah.
They're in a higher dimension.
Isn't one of them like Nibiru or something like that?
Well, that's
Planet X or something.
Nibiru. Yeah, Nibiru is a planet that came from the Sirius system.
Okay.
That lost its orbit a long time ago. Raymond talked about that. I asked the Queen of Venus in one of my interviews with them. I said, "What's the story with Nibiru? Is it a danger?" And she said, "Look, Raymond's talked about that. It has an elliptical orbit of 3,600 years, and it's 1,500.
Which queen are you referring to? Queen Aura?
Raymond's friend, Lady Orda, who took him there.
Orda.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned something interesting about interstellar conversion process with time travel. So that would actually cut down on because it's believed that space is made up of like a mass. It's not really the faster. You can't go too fast, or else you turn into, it would be mass, and you'd probably crush your ship.
I hope you had Raymond on it. Did you read his books? He got to travel in time.
Yes, he talked about that in his travel in time using the handheld thing he had with Dolores Berries, and also the time bubble that you can sit inside and ride around on. And you can also
Dolores
see
Berries.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, Dolores Berries has gone through many names. She was born in 1585 in Spain, and she kind of ended up like Highlander. She didn't understand it, but she couldn't die. She was long-lived. She had to disappear from people. And then in 1830, she was in Northern California. Her story is quite fascinating. She was born in the Basque region of France, and she made it up to California, and she met this being, a Russian fur trapper, said, "You should go up to Mount Shasta. There's some amazing stuff there. They hear all the stuff, and there's lights, and I think you might find some answers up there." So she gets all the way up there, and there is the same guy, and he transformed into what's called an ascended master. And he was the ascended master that died with Christ on the cross. His name was Lord Dismas. He was a thief, stealing from the rich caravanners in Jerusalem and giving to the poor.
Oh, he was the one that he's the one that defied Christ while Christ was on the cross. The other one was saying this man did nothing, but his name was Geismas or Gesmas. Yeah,
Geismas, Dysmas. In esoteric circles, he's known as the Ascended Master El Moria. Mm-hmm. He now is the resident regent of Venus. Now, Dolores Berries, who Raymond knew and met through a gentleman who had arranged for a spaceship to land in front of me with two other witnesses in '84 near Giant Rock in Yucca Valley, because I was having a lot of problems with the out-of-body experiences. I need a physical experience, so they arranged for. It's kind of weird. For people who's not really into this metaphysical stuff can call it fake or whatever, but I can tell you it happened to me, and I don't care. I've been fighting ridicule and disbelief my whole life, so it's water off a duck's back. But he said the Ascended Master Hilarion is sending a teacher. I was doing massage in '84, and I might have gone out on a date. So in the days of pagers, if you remember those, I went to the phone booth, and I called him, and then I hung up, and the phone rang like a fire alarm. People across the street, inside the store, the parking lots, all around were looking, answer the phone. It's obnoxious. It just rang one long time. Really long. So I was kind of thinking that's weird because Gabriel Green said they've given him space phone calls and they have an echo and all that. So I picked it up and I heard the space echo that I'd heard on one of his recordings. And so that was telling me, look, you're 22 years old. You might find a hot date and not come up. You better come up for this meeting. So I made arrangements. I went up to Gabe's house, and there was a military guy who worked in a gray abduction base who had broken his mind control program, and he was in an accident. And he told me, later at some point, I said, so, what do you do? How did this happen for you? He broke his mind control by snapping his neck, and he started to have memories in the space because they put a lot of people under this mind control stuff. And he said that he went to work for 2 weeks, not under mind control. That was supposed to, a bell would ring. He'd go to work at 8. At 8:30, the bell would ring. Everyone stood up like a robot from the time machine going into the underground tunnels with the warlocks. He went to an elevator, and it was checked out for him. He would actually go down to the level that had joint aliens and a few military guys. He would go on the little gray craft and abduct women. So what happened was a long time ago, and I wasn't happy with it, but a think tank controlled by what we now know as the Black Sun World Elites had made a deal to trade humans' lives and for technology. And that's what they've been going on. So this has been a very deep, worldwide deep state. It doesn't matter if it's China, Germany, Japan, England, USA, Brazil. They're all, it's like McDonald's. It doesn't matter. They're all black sun. And this goes back into the very disturbing things that are not generally understood and known. But at this point in time, in the revelation, they're being removed by the Galactic Federation. It's taking out some of these very dark beings that, for some reason, they had the ability to entrench themselves here, literally for 16,000 years. So that's a whole nother can of worms. But I like to focus on the good stuff. So he basically showed me some stuff. He showed me about possession. There was a story there. I've talked about it in other shows, but he basically showed me how to read people's frequencies and understand about the parasitic, non-human, inorganic entities that suck on people's aura in a possession type of infiltration. And Raymond's written an article about that just recently, which is really good. So we've kind of been in ignorance here. And so the truth is coming forward. They've sent us these great spiritual teachers like, Christ. And actually, you got the others, folks. I'm sorry if everyone's judgmental, but you got the Buddha and you got Muhammad. And Muhammad was real. Of course, the religions and the secular churches have always lied, cheated, and tried to put themselves between man and God. That's what priesthoods do. That's what they did in Atlantis. That's what they did in Lemuria that caused the fall of those civilizations. So we are now restoring the rightful sovereignty of individuals on the planet, governments that have been very much involved in these dark plans. And they've been promised to go into the secret underground tunnels and everything, but those have all been destroyed now, so they have nowhere to go, and yet they still want to depopulate the planet through their various means of technologies, the mark of the beast, or the Franken jab, the shot, and the lie of repeated indoctrination of the sheeple that is taking place right now. But this is a great spiritual opportunity for us to learn and to grow. So we're in a very unique place in history, and the truth is being revealed. And that was the promise that they made when they were forced to evacuate at the time of the Atlantis and Lemurian destruction. They promised to return openly, although they've been here all the time.
Yeah, a lot of Ray's books about the second planet, he talks about how we have something within us that can be reborn. I think he called it the space seed or star seed activation, whichever is. It's some kind of form of enlightenment that's supposed to be beamed down to Earth, and every man, woman, and child is supposed to be enlightened by this sudden rush of enlightenment or something like that. So it's caused by some kind of radio wave that's sent down from, I don't know if it's Venus or Mars or one of the, probably Venus.
It comes from the galactic central sun, and our Earth revolves around the sun. The sun revolves around another sun, kind of in the center of the galaxy, and then the center of the galaxy is a black hole. That's known as the galactic, central sun of the pleroma.
Okay,
and from there, it's an interdimensional thing, and then there's billions and trillions of galaxies we can't even begin to see, and somewhere is a fount of creation from which all life springs. It's unknowable, unthinkable. Any word that you talk about it limits it. It's the infinite mind of Almighty God, and God is not a person or a thing. It's a presence. So we do have the reality of the extraterrestrial influence, which you hear some truth and some misinformation and some well-intended deciphering of quote-unquote researchers about mankind's interaction and the influence of the extraterrestrials. And to us, they are demigods. They really are. They have certain powers of technology and telepathy and advanced genetics. And we are we've been managed by some of these beings and races. So they have genetic influence here, and some of them actually fight about it. Genetics is the coin of the realm. So they had a big battle a long, long time ago, and they decided to heal things was that they would all work on a new human together. So that way they wouldn't fight. They could all share the genetics of this advanced being, and that's us. Mm-hmm. And we've now reached a level where the nursery is over. There's no more need for them to be taking our genetics and so forth and so on. So most of them are on board for our liberation and our freedom. And there's a couple, let's call them regressive races, that are have been actually cast down for their actions in the higher dimensions into the physical plane, and they're hell-bent on destruction of humanity, and that's what we see now is this
well, I have a question.
Manipulation.
I have more of a statement, actually. I don't want to get too far ahead, but when we were talking about time travel, you mentioned you guys use crystals and lasers and stuff like that. Because the reason I'm asking, there are scientists out there who are using lasers and trying to use crystals and mirrors and things like that to try to create some kind of time hole or some kind of vortex in an enclosed room by taking away the gravity and using mirrors and using crystals. Is that pretty close to what you're saying, that if time travel can't exist, and are you saying that could be how it could be achieved and how we could get through space-time continuum without actually, I guess, ending up somewhere we don't want to be or whatever? They would probably have to be a GPS system involved as well of some sort, so you don't end up inside of a wall or a mountainside or something like that, because you don't know what it's been like hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. Earth humans in our current state of development have forgotten more than we've ever learned at this point, but on a certain level, because civilizations come and go, and the forces that are here are constantly hiding the truth. The Jesuits have been chipping away for I think they were chipping away like 100 years on the Egyptian hieroglyphs to hide a lot of the truth of the interaction of the star gods or star beings. Mm-hmm. Some of these beings were benevolent and acted as kind mentors and guides to humanity, and others were pretending to be God by exercising their knowledge of the heavenlies and to know when an eclipse was coming and all that stuff. And they said, well, these must be gods or star gods, and they follow along the line of what these negative races were doing. So let me just say, Raymond's experience, there's a type of bilocation signal that they have developed with the Nimbus. And in the time temple, what they call the Metrons on Venus, they monitor the monotonous flow of time. And how they do that, there are, and we can get real complicated here. There's 8 parallel Earths. There's 8 galaxies surrounding M3 Andromeda Galaxy. So we're in a supercluster of galaxies. And the influences of light and the various systems actually affect human DNA. And human DNA was manipulated and created by beings with the intent to activate and to develop human potential and consciousness, and that's what's taking place now. The galactic central sun, the Earth, it sits on the end of, there's 2 arms to our galaxy. We're at the very radial end of the arm of the galaxy. The galaxy is approximately, I think it's 125,000 light years across. Now, one of the closest planets to the black hole is the Pleiades, and they're only 125,000 light years in. So we're looking at, if the other side is the same, 125, we're looking at about 10,000 light years of a giant kind of what they call the pleroma. And these are the mysteries that we can't understand. Science has understood certain things, and there's a lot of very, very high scientists working at a very high secret level that they do not want people to have the technology of healing, the technology. Look, we're driving around in gas cars. Henry Ford could have made it hemp. We could have water cars, and now we can have magnetic cars. But are they going to allow that? No. They don't want to give nothing to humanity, and we are simply in a phase where we're waking up. And many people are waking up, whether it's through the political process or different things with the great changes. People are being challenged to look for the truth, and the truth lies within us. So the reality of the bilocation signal that Raymond looked, he said, the Queen said Dolores, or the woman who he went to Venus with, and who was announced as the Queen by Lord Dismas, who had actually appeared to her when she was 15 years old and running away from a Catholic missionary in northern Spain. She wanted to go to Barcelona, to the New World, where her brother was a conquistador. And Angel appeared in the hayloft and said that the authorities are looking for you. It's good you cut your hair, dress as a boy. Only travel at night and take the southern route. And when you get there, talk to a bishop. So she talked to the bishop. He said, I believe your story. Continue to dress as a boy. You're going to be trained in the lance, the mace, the sword, the short knife, and you're going to become head of my security detachment. So that's what she did. And when she got there, she was discovered, and a guy tried to rape her, and she killed him. And she ran to the church. The bishop protected her and wrote a message to the Pope. And so the Pope, the military said, this is a girl masquerading as a man. We want her. And so he said, you better grant her safe passage. I want to meet her. So she went and talked. The Pope said, gave her a special papal seal and said, you can continue to serve to protect women from the abuses of the men so far away from their home, who are raping and pillaging, as all criminals in war do. So she realized she wasn't aging, and she would step away, and she followed the fathers all the way up with Junipero Sierra. And where I live in Laguna Beach as a child, they have a place called Mission Viejo where the doves always return. So the pigeons. So the pigeons always come back every year. So Father Junipero Sierra was up in Solano, California. When she went to Mount Shasta, she met that same being. She didn't recognize him as the angel that appeared to her in the hayloft, guiding her every move. And then from here, in 1830, she became a dual citizen of Venus and the United States. It's hard to believe, folks, but believe me, if the CIA can create a false identity, if witness protection can create a false identity, if governments can issue passports, believe me, the Venusians create a false identity.
Well, Rob,
they're here, living and walking amongst us.
Yeah, I wanted to know, as well as the Venusians and maybe others, where does Mars fall into this? I've had contact with a gentleman who has been working with Mars photographs from the Viking probes and some of the other probes after that, including the most recent one. And he's going to be in the show maybe in 2 months or so. He has a website. And some of the weird things that I've seen in these photographs that he's been able to decipher using 3D technology from the original photographs that were supposedly, I guess they were doctored up a little bit to hide things. It looks like there were ancient civilizations on Mars, and somehow there's some kind of a genocide that took place up there. Where does Mars fall in all of this, with Venus and all the other civilizations? Do you have anything on that at all?
Yeah, so I can give you the short story is, Mars is one of the physical planets that holds life. So most life is on the interior of a planet, and there's life on a lot of the planets on the interior, or at least there's bases. And they're on a lot of the moons. There's a lot of beings from other systems that have been allowed to come here. If they're members of our confederation, they're allowed to come here and to reside in the system, as long as they're peaceful and they abide by the certain rules. Some other ones are interlopers, so to speak, or intruders, and they have bases and they're hostile. But because they used to blow up worlds, literally blow up worlds like Death Stars for stealing some DNA, causing what they called the Orion War 100,000 years ago. They agreed to have councils and not go that far.
Well, how many of these guys are? You're mentioning a lot of civilizations, but how many of these people are actually these beings are humanoid? Are they like we are?
Yeah, Alpha Centauri looks like us. They look like gymnasts. They're quite muscular. You've got small. You've got the dwarf races. You've got there's a hybridization process that took place in the Shurian ship. And on my website, I do sell Raymond's books, and I had a little book I wrote called My Friends from Venus, and I've been able to ask questions, and I get recorded answers from the Queen of Venus and some written answers from Valiant Thor and a commander. And I've met other Venusians throughout my life, and they never revealed who they were, although I knew them. So the other thing is here's the deal with Mars. In the soul development life, your first incarnation after you become like a physical being, you would probably go to Mars. And so that's kind of like a basic life and getting thing. It'd be boring for us. So what happened on Mars was, there was some negativity, interlopers that came here a long time ago to destroy the planet, which is the asteroid belt. It used to be called the Morning Star, and it was named Maldek, and it was infiltrated by a deep, dark reptilian guy named Marduk. And so, they evacuated there, and some of them came to Earth and were living inside the Earth. And that's kind of the negative force. It's been a long history to remove some of these negative beings that seem to think they own the universe, and they're going around destroying life. So Mars, life is underground. They destroyed their atmosphere to a certain extent. It's come back now. They do have plenty of civilizations on the surface. They do have some canals, water canals, where they do trade and commerce. Now, the government has been allowed to go up there, and they have a secret space program. And this was developed by the Nazis in a conjoint effort with what we call the Black Sun, or the human hybrids that consider themselves gods and above us, and that we're slaves, and that we need nothing. This is the demons, and it really is kind of, unfortunately, a battle of the dark and light. But the truth of the matter is that people are very ignorant of what's happening. But when this really is understood, people will understand a tremendous amount of information, and we will be able to ourselves climb into the heavenlies. When this giant galactic pulse takes place, sometime in 2025, most likely, there will be a great shift in consciousness, and people will understand a lot of things. And with the open communication of our brothers and sisters from the stars, we will be able to access the technology that is kind of like time travel. It's called the Akashic Records. Mm-hmm. So the Akashic Records, they could do that. So on Mars, he'd probably be able to show you some of those kind of look like worms in the sand. Those are the tube shuttles that they have that are broken down. There's also, a lot of ancient technology of Egyptian type hieroglyphs and things like that. There's there's Cydonia. There's the pyramid on Mars. So pyramids are used on all planets, and they vary depending on the gravity and the consciousness of the planet, whether the angles, the sides, and all of that. So that's a universal shape throughout the universe, and it represents the carbon atom. The carbon atom is like a tetrahedron, and then you have oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, which make up all elements on the physical plane. So those are the four directions, the four primordial elements. And the great sciences that will come forward now that the negative forces is going to be removed. It's happening, and they're in their death throes now. There's nothing they can do. The people are going to awaken. They may even wipe out a third of humanity who goes along with their program to inject themselves with a microchip and to become a radio antenna for an advanced 5G technology to separate the iron from the hemoglobin in the blood, and you won't be able to breathe. That's they're telling you it's a virus or one thing, but it's really a 5G technology. There are forces within the Earth that have been liberated from the dark force, and they are working in concert with certain elements in the surface. So most of the life on Mars is underneath. They're very loving. They're very advanced. They look to Venus as a teacher, just as Venus, looks to other worlds. They all have trade and commerce. They don't use money because it always creates lack, scarcity, power, greed. Everything is done by barter. But they create their worlds in cooperation. So they don't come from scarcity and lack. They come from prosperity and abundance. And they've made recommendations to me and others how to overcome that. So when you see the Mars stuff, there's some pictures of flying cars, and I saw a video years ago Fred had. It was a VHS tape of the actual first landing on Mars in 1963, and when it landed underneath the module, it was a kind of a fusion drive spaceship, and underneath the module there was an animal move. So it says we're on Mars and there's life. So eventually the Black Sun world domination parasite that had been doing some very nasty things in conjunction with traitors to humanity, who have been brought up under a very severe type of mind control, and it's so out there, dude. I can't tell you. It's just really wild. But,
yeah, I'm getting a mindful here. This is really intense. Another thing too about when you're saying about Mars, you're saying about spaceships. I have seen pictures where it looks like there's like spaceships that look very much like some of our aircraft that are there, but they look like they've been there a lot longer than we've ever, before we even created these aircraft that we have here. Also, there's temples that seem to have been torn down and ripped apart, or from whatever happened on that planet. There's remnants left over, and there's ruins of old temples with writing on it. It looks very much like Roman, Greek, and Egyptian architecture. Statues that have been ripped down, faces all over Mars, different statuesque faces, even animals, like small herbivorous creatures that look like they might have been from like our prehistoric time, but only smaller.
Yeah, when Malbec was destroyed, meteorites hit Mars pretty heavily, as well as Venus. But so there was a lot of disruption. It was a great tragedy for the solar system. So you're saying
it's all meteorites. It wasn't like bombs or war.
No, it was caused by bombs and wars. Okay. And they always develop. It happens throughout the galaxy. Whenever a civilization gets to the third and starts to move into the fourth dimension is time. And here's a funny thing. Time doesn't really exist at all.
That's right.
Everything's taking place at once. So we can't even begin to wrap our little three-dimensional minds about it. But
exactly. I did a show about time travel, and I say the exact same thing. Time does not exist. No such thing. Yeah, it's a human concept.
We're moving through eternity a little bit at a time, and by the time we get there, it's already mutated into something else. So,
right.
People say, "Oh, did God create the universe, or did He create evolution?" Or it's both, because God did create evolution, and things do have natural, what they call passive order, and we're just beginning to understand these things. But it's a wonderful.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense, because there are lots of books and lots of scientists out there that agree with this, because a rock can become a mountain, or a mountain can become a rock, or in our lifetime. In this very second, there are things that are decaying away, and things that are being created. There is past, present, and future, all in one are happening in one instant.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So it's really. People start to research this. There's a spiritual side of consciousness and the masters and knowing who we are and how we develop. And then there's the hidey hole of the silence group, the traitors to humanity that have been put in positions. And most of them are put in there. They're either bribed by money or they're blackmailed. Imagine you're a senator and Tip O'Neill maybe invited you to his house. They give you the day rate drug, Hypnol, that Bill Cosby used and many of the other Hollywood elites use.
Can I ask you a question, Rob? I'm kind of interested a little bit in Mount Shasta. What's going on there, too?
Okay. So Mount Shasta, 29,000 years ago, at the sinking of Atlantis and Lemuria, the light forces managed to corral some really heavy negative beings from the Pleiades. And somehow, it's like Superman's story I heard. This is from a reputable source. They put them inside the Earth here. And at the time of the sinking of Lemuria, the Lemurians, I think they moved here with like 20 or 30,000 people, and they lived underneath the Earth. There was a flood and everything. So they basically lived underneath the Earth, and they're now probably 1.5 million people, according to a friend of mine who went in there this last July. His name is Lowell Johnson, and he wasn't even thinking. He didn't even know about all this stuff, and just ended up being invited in because they said that there's going to be a frequency shift on the Earth, and they just wanted him to become familiar. So there's legends about this group of tall white beings, and they're part of what is known as the Great White Brotherhood. These are descendants of Atlantis and Lemuria that went inside the Earth. And most of the ones that are in there are pretty positive, although they're very small pockets. So they all interconnect through lava tubes and super high technology, super shuttle trains. And some of them were very negative and bad. Unfortunately, you have this dark and the light. So we're coming to a position now where mankind is waking up to the truth of what they call the Agarthans. So the Mount Shasta is one of the largest intergalactic ports. There's huge spaceships landing here. The Venusians have given them some technology, one called the Living Stone, where they have a pyramid, and the pyramid changes colors based on the magnetic influences of the planets. People think, astrology is fake. Actually, the magnetic influences of the moon are well documented. You have biorhythms of Mercury on the mental body. You have biorhythms on the emotional body of Venus at 44 days. And you have the moon, of course, every 28 days, causing fluctuations in the biology and in the hormones of the humans. And that's where our feelings come from, is from hormones. It's the first unit of biochemistry that possesses consciousness. So when you wear a pyramid on your head, you're putting your head inside a balanced Faraday cage that protects from radiation, 5G, and it actually can harmonize your pineal and pituitary gland. These are known as the third eye and the crown chakra. So the science of who we are as spiritual beings in a biology suit, you are a soul, a spiritual soul first. And we're in this unique situation here on Earth, but the Agarthans, a friend of mine, has been to the other aspects, other areas inside the Earth in South America. Another contactee of the Venusians primarily. His name is Luis Mostojo Martins, and his book is just coming out. He's got 5 books. I finally got one published in English now. But he's been to Ganymede, he's been to Venus, he's been inside 3 of the inner Earth, or what we call Agarthan or Asgard groups, and they're preparing for us. They're preparing huge, kind of like a welcoming for us when we can put away war. In order to get to this level, and how are we going to get there, guys? We have to end war. We have to share the Earth's resources. We have to have a truly representative government. We have to respect all life. We can't be having these black sun families creating these foods, polysorbate, genetically altered foods, chemtrails, vaccinations, hypnotic entrainment through television, advanced frequency manipulation of human consciousness. Everything right now on our world is designed to suppress our spiritual consciousness. But it's not sustainable. It never has, never was, never will be. Because the human soul is directly connected to Source. You are a living Word of God. Jesus said, "Know ye your gods." So we are all connected in this web of life, and we're all individuals at the same time. We are all part and parcel of the I am. You can call it the Krishna consciousness. On another world, they may call it the gobbledygook consciousness. But the principle is the same. And as we rise into our awareness of truth, this is happening because of the unique light frequencies. As the Earth rises above the galactic plane, there's not a bunch of planets blocking the central sun. So we're in a 1,000-year cycle in the curve of the rise and fall above and below the galactic plane that is activating junk DNA. And if you look at the history of mankind, we have certain spurts in our evolution in the Renaissance period and stuff like that. So a lot of things are changing for us, and this is the long prophesized end of many cycles. There's the smaller cycles, the bigger cycles. You look at the Mayan calendar, that's all based on the Venusian calendar. I mean, there's so many amazing things for us to discover, but we're being distracted. We're being assaulted, and we are locking ourselves in our own prisons of money, war, greed. So that's the message and hope of the Venusians, is to make us aware, one loving heart at a time, and to follow the great teachings, to do unto others as we would have done unto ourselves, and to realize that we're all children of a living, loving, infinite mind of the Creator. And those words limited, but we're all brothers and sisters. So we can disagree, we can have different viewpoints, but we must respect each other in all life.